Well, The Black Phone is a movie I've had my eye on for a while, really wanting to watch it. Finally, the everything lined up for me to be able to do that. But was it worth the wait? Stick around, I'll share my thoughts. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of The Black Phone. The synopsis on IMDb reads, after being abducted by a child killer and locked in a soundproof basement, a 13-year-old boy starts receiving calls on a disconnected phone from the killer's previous victims. Okay, so how would I describe the basic story, script, pacing, tone of this animal? It's a period suspense drama, takes place in 1978, with supernatural slash horror elements. It's actually really interesting because it's this grounded premise of a real world abductor of children, and then kind of injected into it has this supernatural element that the captive boy discovers in the room he's being held in. And it's also kind of being built on what I began to perceive as the skeleton of a coming-of-age story. Now, ultimately, the coming-of-age elements and the movie-ish tropes kind of hurt some of my experience of the drama and suspense due to both the style of the dialogue writing for the child characters at times, which felt a little unrealistic and movie-ish despite the kind of really heavy and grounded premise of child abduction, and then also the performances of the child actors in recurring instances. But kind of like the final note that the movie ends on after this horrible situation has resolved is one that, how can I talk about this without spoiling anything? Kind of like the moral of the story, or the coming of age, the resolution of the coming of age element, really kind of was the last statement of the movie, and I'm like, who cares if he's coming of age and figuring out how to get along with kids at school? What he just went through is horrific. That he is smiling at all after that is ridiculous. So I guess I kind of spoiled that the kid survives, right? But I mean, I think going into this movie, you kind of know it's not the kind of movie that's going to kill the kid at the end. There are very few of those. And I don't think that should come as a surprise that this isn't one of them. But the cost involved with his survival, the experience that he went through, makes the final note of the movie seem weird. And that's, probably the most clear example that I experienced while watching the movie of how it was these mixed combinations of different types of movies that didn't fully commit to any of them. And in some ways that was kind of cool, but in particular the coming of age elements I could have done without. As far as the cast goes, the two child actors playing Finney, the boy, and his sister Gwen had really great emotional access. I mean, wow. I was especially moved and disturbed in a scene where Gwen is crying while being disciplined and actually physically abused by her father. And the way she was crying felt very real and unsettling to me. So that was really something. But by contrast, many other scenes involving simple dialogue exchanges from Gwen did not feel natural to me and took me out of the experience frequently. And that's really the reverse of what I will oftentimes feel about child actor performances. Now, some of this might have been the dialogue writing, but it ultimately felt in many instances like a child actor delivering lines more than like a real child. Maybe if they had allowed for more improvisation and ad-libbing of lines and not sticking so much to the written dialogue, that would have helped. I don't know. Now, granted, I have unusually low tolerance for child actors. That needs to be taken into consideration. If it's not at the Dakota Fanning level, I don't want any of it. I'd rather you tell me stories about adults than ask a child actor to do what they're not up for doing on the level that an adult actor can do, with the realism and the ability to convince me that an adult, seasoned, skilled adult actor has. So, my response to the child performances here should take that low tolerance into consideration. They were certainly as solid as most child actors I see in movies and TV, with some emotional access that is often sorely lacking. So, Ethan Hawke, it should be said, I thought did a fine job as the abductor, although his subtle style of acting that I'm used to, kind of thinking of him associated with doesn't come through as much because he's wearing a mask for most of the movie. But still, it's suitably eerie performance as far as I'm concerned that helped with the suspense. As far as the stunts and visuals go, there's not really stunts, but the visual presentation I'll speak about briefly. There are times when it feels directed a bit like a play, with extended, uncut shots that artistically portray Finney's conversations with ghosts on the phone by placing the actor that's playing the ghost in the room behind and over his shoulder, and he never sees them, even though it feels like it should be obvious that he would see them if they were there. It felt like something artistic that was being done there, but more artistic than ominous. It actually deflated some of the tension, the suspense, the supernatural mystery of the whole thing for me. And I would have preferred the ghosts to remain more obscured, seen less, to sort of play up their mysterious, otherworldly nature. Instead, they felt strangely commonplace to me when they inhabited this space so clearly and for so long. As far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Well, there certainly are, and that actually didn't surprise me because I knew in advance going in that this director, Scott Derrickson, is a Christian, and I'll comment on that briefly at the very end. But anyway, Gwen has some dreams that come true, this seemingly supernatural ability, and she has a very active prayer life that is specifically directed toward Jesus. Although the dialogue writing and performances don't work for me in these scenes, her prayer life does reflect the real struggle that any of us can have in trusting that Jesus is good, that he actually cares, that he's actually active in the world, or that he's even real. So the kinds of doubts and struggles she's having are very relatable. So I really appreciate that honesty. I just wish those ideas had been portrayed by an adult character in a different and more authentic feeling or relatable way for me. Now, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, watch this at some point. You definitely want to watch it at some point. The director, Scott Derrickson, also a producer and co-writer on this movie, who before this directed the first Doctor Strange movie, Sinister, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and Hellraiser Inferno. Scott Derrickson is a Christian and graduate of Biola University, so you're going to want to continue following his work in geek entertainment. He does solid work so far. You really like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and Sinister, I think you really like too. So he's got great chops in that, and it's a very rare for a Christian like him to be in his kind of creative position in Hollywood, specifically as a director. But although the movie will connect with you in some of its unsettling and suspenseful moments, other moments are going to unfortunately keep you at a distance due to dialogue and performances. So it's not urgent or must-watch viewing for you. This one is rated for violence, bloody images, language, and some drug use. And those are all my thoughts for now on The Black Phone. I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below about this movie or Scott Derrickson's other movies. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/Spirit Productions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.